We turn next to Washington and live images there of the White House. The other big story that we will be following today, Donald Trump now stands alone in history. He's the first U.S. president to be impeached twice, and he appears closer to having another stain on his presidency. The first president to be convicted, removed from office potentially in a Senate impeachment trial. There is House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signing the sole article of impeachment. The 4-page document charges Trump with inciting insurrection over last week's deadly attack on Capitol Hill and accuses him of threatening U.S. democracy, interfering with the peaceful transfer of power and imperiling Congress. As our senior correspondent Susan Ormiston tells us this morning, the focus now turns to Trump's Senate trial, something that now appears set to happen after he leaves office next week.
He must go. He is a clear and present danger to the nation.
Trump was baselessly and deliberately whipping his supporters into a frenzy.
This is our capital!
One after another, Democrats castigated the president for inciting an insurrection.
Are you on the side of chaos and the mob, or on the side of constitutional democracy and our freedom? It's that simple.
Not that simple, though, for Republicans, a majority who returned to the theme of Trump the target.
Now it's impeachment round 2. It's always been about getting the president, no matter what.
The craving to crush President Trump has never been satisfied.
Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
But in the end, 10 Republicans did vote to impeach, a record number voting against their party.
1 week ago, this hall was filled with violent rioters with lightning speed. The House has voted to impeach Donald Trump again, but his trial won't come until after he leaves the White House. And it will take many more Republicans, including perhaps a nod from Mitch Mcconnell, to convict and assure that Trump could never run for office again.
This is what the end result is.
About a year ago, Trump boasted the party loved him. He was acquitted of impeachment and nothing could stop him. So dramatically different now. He's lost, isolated, and facing a trial that could go against him. Trump belatedly calling for calm.
No true supporter of mine could ever endorse political violence.
Washington is barricaded, locked down, National Guardsmen camping inside the Capitol building. Thousands more arriving as an impeachment and an inauguration intersect.
So now a Trump trial haunts Biden's first days as president. Biden said that insurrection was incited by the president and planned and coordinated by political extremists. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Washington.
For more on this, Maya King is back with us this morning, a politics reporter for Politico, frequently on our program, and we always appreciate it when she is with us from Washington. Maya, good morning.
Good morning.
It may have been a foregone conclusion, the impeachment. Still, it was historic, that moment when Nancy Pelosi brought down the gavel and then signed the article. You were watching, Maya. What does it mean?
Well, I mean, this is an extremely significant moment in American history and American politics. We know that, and have said repeatedly, Trump is the first president now to be impeached twice. This is not necessarily a win for Democrats or Republicans because it was such a threat to national security, the situation that brought forth his impeachment. But I think now what we're starting to see is Democrats begin to consolidate their power and their majority in both chambers of Congress. And Republicans are beginning to fracture along ideological lines, depending on who supports the president and what they'd like to see his impact on the party be moving forward.
Pause on that because I want to come back to it, but I do want to also get Trump's response to all of this. We looked at a little bit of the video statement. He did not acknowledge the impeachment, Maya, but he did release this video, and it's pretty interesting in terms of tone and content. So let's listen together to some more of it.
I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement. Today I am calling on all Americans to overcome the passions of the moment and join together as one American people.
So a very different Donald Trump from the Trump we heard just outside the Capitol last week. And I'm wondering, as he issued that message directly to supporters, what do you think was the motivation behind that kind of a statement?
Well, a number of things. First, we know that his advisors have been letting him know that following his speech last week that led in part to his supporters heading to the Capitol, the president actually exposed himself to potential legal ramifications for that. And so I think that part of this is his way of sort of cleaning up that past and saying that he doesn't support violence and doesn't condone it, and would give him an opportunity to perhaps say that he never supported violence on the part of his supporters. And there's also just this idea of the fact that, you know, the timing of this video came out very quickly after the impeachment vote, which is, of course, something that made very clear Democrats and Republicans' rebuke of a lot of the things that President Trump has been saying. And so by releasing this video, this is another way for this president, who now has 6 days left in his term, to try to save face and leave office with some level of dignity and of decorum, which is what any outgoing president would aim to do. But as we know, this is not just any outgoing president, and the events that have taken place have just never occurred.
That's interesting. So potentially preserving legacy, rebuilding brand as part of that, based on what you're suggesting there. Coming back to the violence point, though, there have been many who have said the president must say something directly to his supporters in order to tamp down the violence. You've already acknowledged the growing threats ahead of inauguration. What effect will this statement have, do you think, if any, toward doing that?
Well, for what we know about Trump's supporters, particularly the most ardent of those and those who would be willing to come to D.C. to protest on his behalf, a message like this may serve a few of them or a portion of them to say, okay, well, I'm hearing what he's saying, and so I will stand down. But, I mean, we also have to remember that the plans for the Million MAGA March to return to Washington to protest Joe Biden's inauguration and potentially incite more violence are plans that have been in place now for weeks on social media boards and in conversations with Trump supporters, particularly those on the far right. So there may very likely be a number of his supporters who say that this message encouraged them to stand down. But I think that the threat is already there, and it's been now several years of this tension really building up with this president not condemning violence. And so it may also be too little too late to really protect against the very credible threat of domestic terror as a result of the rhetoric that this president has put forward.
Maya, as Susan Ormiston did in her report before you, turn with me, if you would, to the future and look ahead to the Senate trial that will be coming. Mitch McConnell, for now the Senate Majority Leader, says there's simply no chance of concluding a trial before the end of Trump's presidency. So what happens from here?
Well, it's almost like there's a pause now in this process. So the House has impeached Trump, which is a very strong message to send, of course, to him. And it's something that will go down in history. But as far as him being indicted or convicted, that's something that will not take place until Joe Biden is properly president, which is something that Democrats and Republicans had been discussing doing. We know that Mitch McConnell is not going to reconvene the Senate to try to convict or remove this president any earlier. But what would happen if he is convicted, of course, is one of the biggest results that Democrats were going for here. The fact that if he is convicted, he won't be able to seek re-election or any other political office.
It's interesting, the whole question of Republicans. 10 at the House did vote to impeach, which is 10 more than did the first time round. But still, even after the violence, the vast majority of Republicans still supported Donald Trump, which is an extraordinary thing. So you talked about the split in the Republican Party. I'm wondering, Mitch McConnell, when it gets to the trial point, He's signaled, according to reports, that he's pleased with impeachment, so it will allow Donald Trump's influence to lessen within the Republican Party. But could you ever foresee Mitch McConnell voting to convict Donald Trump?
That's a great question. That certainly remains to be seen. Though, I mean, with the pattern that we've seen with Republicans, I think it's very significant that 10 of them in the House did vote to impeach, which is more than one would ever expect even a year ago to take place. And in McConnell's case, he's obviously a very high-profile leader within the party, someone that people look to, even though he won't be majority leader in this incoming Congress. If the feeling does hold and he does decide to convict, the ramifications will not be as strong. We know that Trump is not as prominent of a leader of the Republican Party as he once was, and in fact, in some circles, is considered more of a disgraced figure. And so I think that the calculus, at least in McConnell's head, is that he can delay the vote for a while, allow it to set in that this is a president who's been impeached twice, and when the Senate returns, and there's a need, of course, for the 2/3 vote, he could potentially vote to convict and not be seen so much as an enemy of the party, because the one person that he would be voting to convict is no longer at the top.
Maya, we always appreciate your insight. I look forward to speaking to you again. We'll have to have you back in Inauguration Week next week, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Maya. Maya King, who's a politics reporter for Politico, and she's in Washington today.